Hello and welcome back to the Keep Right On podcast. I'm Alex Dicken and today I'm joined by one of our resident fan vloggers, Ryan Deeney, to discuss pre-season, the game on Saturday against Nottingham Forest, Blues' final pre-season fixture, and a little bit more. Just to lay the table, I'd apologise for not having a podcast in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Obviously, I think people can appreciate it's very difficult this time of year with holidays and whatnot to get two people in a room at the same time and put together or not in a room at the same time, on Zoom at the same time and put a podcast together. But this is hopefully the start of a regular stream for the remainder of August. Ryan, thanks for coming on. Reflections on Forest to begin with?
It's quite positive, wasn't it? We started really well. I thought there was, again, a good intensity about us. We moved the ball quite well. I think there's a fluidity already sort of building between certain parts. I think you can see almost the increased sort of technical and physical levels that players like Doyle, Asai Samuel and Gray bring to the team. And yeah, I thought first half we started both halves really well. And I suppose as happened in pre-season friendlies, the last half hour sort of became a bit of the whole team sort of changes, doesn't it? And it's not quite the same game then. So you're mostly focusing on that sort of first half and how we start the game and how we get on. And I thought we competed really well. Good competitive game. Probably meant a little bit more to us than it did to Forest. But yeah, I think you can only focus on what you've done. And it's quite positive heading into the new season.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, you look at the first 60 minutes, don't you? Especially the first half. I thought Blues were the better team. They only really conceded one half decent chance to Forest when I think they gave the ball away on the right-hand side, didn't they? And Gibbs White got in beyond midfield and set Dan Doyle away for a chance. But apart from that, it was largely Blues in the ascendancy. Stansfield had 2 good chances before he actually scored his goal, which again, I didn't quite see it at the time, but I've seen it back and it's a nice little flick pass from Tommy Doyle around the corner to find him. Clever pass. Again, that's kind of Premier League quality, isn't it? And Stansfield set himself well to finish. So yeah, Blues I thought looked good. Having watched them the previous week at Port Vale, I thought they looked far more in sync. I had a few concerns after Port Vale, but then again, I did remind myself it is only pre-season. These things do take time and they do happen. But they looked very in sync against Forest. And I probably think, speaking to Chris Davies afterwards, and I kind of put it to him without expecting him to reveal his starting 11 for Ipswich, but are these players in pole position to start that game? And you can see obviously they are. There might be a tweak here and there, but largely he would expect it to be something very similar. So, thoughts on that? Do we like the look of the 11? Is there anyone outside the 11 that we think should be in it, or is he getting it right there?
I think when you look at the first subs he brought on, it was Willemsen. I'm trying to remember now. Willemsen, Leonard, Cashin, and Kyogo that came on for Stansfield, Peck, and Newman, who obviously had their knocks and presumably are being managed. And I think Doyle was the other to go off, Werner.
Yes.
I think when you look at those first 4 changes and compare that to those that were starting, it's hard to really put up an idea that, it's going to be a different 11. I'm quite happy with it. I thought, you can see the sort of tweaks to the shape, and I don't know whether this is the case of the personnel we've currently got in the building. We're obviously, we'll get onto it, but, the likelihood is we're going to bring in sort of 3, 4, 5 more. So hopefully, boost the starting 11 and also boost the sort of quality of the squad. But you can see the little changes there, things such as, Stansfield being the one to drop off to create the box with Doyle and the other 2 midfielders, and then Gray sort of making moves in behind Stansfield and sort of allowing Asai Samuel to come around the outside. But the timing of that seemed quite good in respect of Asai Samuel coming onto the ball rather than, a lot of last season, Laird was just stood on the final line of defence, wasn't it? And it looks like we're sort of, the idea maybe we're coming on to play a little bit more rather than being stood in the final third, sort of waiting for the ball to come. And yeah, just little things like that. Little tweaks. I thought Iwata played a little bit more towards the right and Doyle towards the left with Peck in the middle, which I thought was quite interesting. And again, fluidity there, but you can see the signs of the shape we're trying to build now. And it'll be interesting to see how that goes on moving forward.
Yeah, there are some interesting little details, aren't there? I really, really like the balance of the team. Like playing Gray on the right. I think most of us obviously expected him to come in and play off the left because that's where he's played most of his football. That's certainly where he, really thrived for Blues in his first spell coming through. But But I think the position off the right, Chris Davies said afterwards that he played him when he was at Leicester. They played him off the right quite a bit because they had Harvey Barnes on the left. And I think coming inside, it did seem to work really well. And it allowed him to get into the kind of those almost free, loose attacking positions that he probably wouldn't be able to get into in this system if he was hugging the left touchline, because we know Keshi Anderson's role is quite set and rigid. He's one of the players that are expected to hold the width, and he stays there most of the time. The balance of having Keshi Anderson as a left winger, I think, is really important as well, because, Alex Cochrane, for all his qualities, I do think he would be susceptible to pace of a winger in the Championship, and that's going to go up this season with the level. So you wouldn't want him to be isolated that often. And I noticed yesterday when, Dan and Doig got into a 1v1 against Cochrane, Keshi Anderson was right back there, literally within a split second, to make it a 2v1 situation. And obviously Blues managed to snuff out the danger. So I think playing Keshi there just kind of almost negates that little weakness potentially that Cochrane might have in a 1v1 against a very fast winger. It's interesting that Christoph Klara is now playing on the left of the defensive two, because, when he's in possession, obviously it becomes a back three with Cochrane on the left, Klara in the middle, and Phil Neumann on the right. Phil Neumann is the faster of the centre-backs Blues have got, so that worked to have him as an outside centre-back. So if ever a left winger did isolate him, as they did with Klara at times last season, Neumann's better suited to deal with that situation than Klara is. So there are nice little balances all over the pitch. And you mentioned about Doyle, it could become more of a 4-3-3 at times this season than a 4-2-3-1, I think, because obviously Doyle is naturally more of a central midfield player than a number 10. And Chris Davies did say afterwards that he can play as a 6, 8 or 10. And I think he's got the quality to play as that 10, because we've seen in pre-season the little passes, the cute little passes in those attacking areas. Doyle does play them very well compared to some of Blues other players. So he's got that those intricacies in his game, and he's playing the position quite well generally. So yeah, it looks quite good. I wanted to come on to the battles that have been won, because there have been some battles in pre-season. Ryan Allsop versus James Beadle. We always expect the goalkeeper on loan for a Premier League club to come in and take the number 1 shirt, or not shirt, but place at least. Bright Asai Samuel and Ethan Laird has been a good matchup at right back. Asai Samuel now obviously seems to have won that. Neumann and Cashin, and obviously Stansfield and Kyogo. Are you surprised that they are, Allsop, Asai Samuel, Neumann and Stansfield are the winners? Or, is that kind of just a case of, I suppose, Blues going up a level in terms of Asai Samuel and Neumann, at least up in the quality in terms of the players?
I mean, I'm similar to you in terms of Allsop surprises me just on account of, you expect, particularly the noises around Beadle. I think it's been shared, hasn't it? Brighton see him as a future England number 1 and their number 1. And, it's all real positive talk. So you kind of expected he'd just come in and take the number 1 shirt. But I've got no problem with Allsop standing as number 1. And to be fair, I think it'd put a lot of pressure on Beadle to come in, given that the fans have got such an affinity with Allsop. And I think there's such an affinity there, and such a sort of, I suppose, a bit of a calmness and composure that he brings, particularly after the issues with Peacock Farrell, who by all accounts had a shocker yesterday on his Blackpool debut. I think the fans would have been, it'd have put a lot of pressure on Beadle straight away, particularly when he didn't have a great end to the season with Sheffield Wednesday either. So that one I could have understood it either way. I'm quite happy that Allsop's won out. Asai Samuel and Neumann, it just feels like there's an extra power to the defence. I think my general feeling with the Asai Samuel and Laird battle so far is Asai Samuel looks a bigger, quicker. He looks more of an athlete. It looks like it doesn't take too much effort for him to cover those 40 yards running backwards and getting back into position. Whereas it's not that Laird isn't quick. I think he's quick over those first few yards, and I don't think he's particularly the strongest runner across the long distances that maybe you'd expect. Whereas Asai Samuel looks like he just sort of breezes through them. I think what Laird has the advantage on is the technical side. I think he looks cleaner technically than Asai Samuel does. Asai Samuel looks like he's better maybe running to sort of open space essentially. The Neumann Cashin battle, which I assume it will come down to, I think you just mentioned it there. Clara looks a little more set defensively, playing in the middle of the back three. Looks like he can just step out and dominate and do the defensive work he wants to do. And I think Davis referenced it might have been the interview with you where he said he wants his defenders to defend first.
Yeah.
But there is also that element. He hasn't made a mistake yet, and I don't want to drill down on it, but there has been a couple of moments maybe where he's looked a little bit awkward being shifted onto his left side and having to play off his right foot.
Clara, this is.
Yeah, Clara.
Yeah, I thought that yesterday, to be fair, against Forest. I agree with that.
And you do wonder at some stage whether, I don't know if it becomes an issue, because I think Clara's a very good footballer and he'll work it out. He's obviously got more time to develop into that role as well. But it'd be interesting to see how that one moves going forward. If that becomes a problem, does Cashin then come in to allow a bit more balance with a right footer and a left footer? But you get the impression either way, Clara is going to start. So it depends on whichever makes the better balance between the others. And yeah, Stansfield, I never really expected him not to start the season. Whether he produces the goals and the output that we want, I don't know. But I think just his energy and the way he plays, and there is an intelligence to his game as well. And it's hard to imagine the team, particularly start of this season, it's hard to imagine him not being in the team just because it brings so much off the ball as well as on it.
Yeah, I do. I'm not surprised they've rushed. Well, I say rushed. They've been quick to put Stansfield back into the 11 and get him 60 minutes or so against Forest, try and get him up to speed for Ipswich, because I think naturally he's going to have a lot of fitness backed up over the summer because he played for the 21s and his season didn't finish until July. So him missing 2 pre-season matches isn't going to make a great deal of difference. I think the difference between Stansfield and Kyogo at this moment in time in terms of that position is that Stansfield knows the role inside out, doesn't he? You can see that he makes the movements that his teammates appreciate and they know where he's going to be at all times, whereas particularly against Port Vale, Kyogo is making lots of movements, but his teammates weren't picking him out and weren't kind of looking to pick him out. So they're clearly not quite on the same wavelength yet. Chris Davies did say after the game against Forest, again, Kyogo came on and made a lot of movement without being picked out. There was one where Keshi Anderson clipped a ball over the top and he almost got there ahead of Sells, but he didn't really have much to go on. And Chris Davies did say it's kind of a question of training and time and getting them on the same wavelength, but also noted that the quality of Kyogo's runs. So it's clear that he doesn't think Kyogo's doing anything wrong, that Kyogo's not in sync with them. It's a case of the teammates understanding what Kyogo is doing, I think, more. But yeah, they're both going to be assets over the season. I am leaning towards thinking they might be rotated quite a bit, as the striker. I think Kyogo will definitely play as striker. I don't see him playing deeper. I know he played that role at Celtic, but I think Chris Davies, from what he said about Kyogo, it does suggest that he wants him on the shoulder making those runs rather than dropping deep. Whereas Stansfield, I could see him at times maybe not playing left in this system because I don't think he'll give Alex Cochrane the support someone like Keshi Anderson does. But I could see him playing as like a withdrawn striker as a number 10. Obviously not in the same way that Tommy Doyle does it, but he could play that position. He's very effective in the Championship. His first season with Blues at times in that position, so we could see that. But yeah, I'm not surprised that Stansfield looks as though he's going to start the season because he is the safer bet at this moment in time, isn't he?
I think Davis made reference to after one of the pre-season games where he said you can see that some of the guys from last season are still recognising those patterns, and it probably isn't a huge surprise, although you might look at it on paper and say our best team might contain 7 new signings. You can see why only maybe 3-4 have been brought in just to, what is it before, weren't it, besides Samuel Neumann, Gray and Doyle, all played to really good levels as well. And you can see why there's just that little bit of a I suppose slowly bringing in the new guys to the fold, isn't it? And making sure that those that were there last season set the standard, really. Yeah,
the key is we've mentioned Ipswich a few times, haven't we? And Ipswich went on a ridiculous run at the start of the 23-24 season after winning promotion from League One with exactly the same group of players that had taken them up. They won, I think, 10 of the first 12, and by Christmas were almost clear at the top of the league or in the automatics in that fight with 2 other teams. And I do think that Blues' big advantage going into the start of the season is their continuity. So they've got, Chris Davies is already, I think, the 5th longest serving manager of the Championship. He's had a year to, bed in these principles of play in League One where, let's be honest, at times there wasn't a great deal of pressure on Blues. They were always going to win a lot of the games because of the quality they had. So they had time to bed in this system and style of play. And they're now so used to it that it comes naturally to most of these players. So why would you not go into the next season with 7 of those players in your starting 11? It makes sense too, because that gives you an advantage, doesn't it? A continuity advantage, and hopefully Blues do manage to hit the ground running like Ipswich did, and give themselves a platform to build from.
Yeah.
Away from the football, a lot happened yesterday. Obviously, it was the Trevor Francis Memorial game. So the statue was unveiled outside the main entrance, the Cop stand. Douglas Jennings, to be fair, has done a fantastic job in creating that and bringing it to life. It was superb, to be fair, and nice to see. Obviously, one of his former clubs, Forest, they're paying tribute as well. There's a good chunk of people outside the Cop stand by one of the fan parks to see the unveiling of that statue. And over 18,000 fans inside the stadium for a friendly is pretty remarkable. I was suggesting it could be around that number to someone earlier this week, and they kind of, thought I was joking because it's a friendly game. But it just shows kind of the feel-good factor around the club that many people want to turn up to a friendly, because let's face it, given the number of season tickets sold, which I think is around 20,000, and the number of people now on the season ticket waiting list, it's probably going to be quite hard for a lot of people to actually get a ticket to games this season at St Andrews, because I'm expecting most of them to be sellout crowds. So why not take in a high quality pre-season friendly against Premier League opposition? Just to put that into context, I was looking at Coventry City's attendance for their final friendly against St Pauli, a Bundesliga side, on Saturday. It was around the 8,000 mark. So I think that just shows kind of what an effort Blues fans made for that Forest game, and to mark the 2 years since Trevor Francis passed away as well. A slight funny thing after the game was the Blues social media post, a win over Mr. Marinakis, Nottingham Forest, which seemed to go viral very quickly before it was taken down. But yeah, a little bit of humour that probably won't be appreciated by Mr. Marinakis, and maybe he'll even put out a statement at some point later today to hit back at it. That's what a lot.
Yeah, probably need to be careful what you say about Marinakis, given the stories. I think it's one of them, isn't it? I think any other time of the season, it's fair game. I think probably in the context of the friendly and why the friendly was happening, it's probably not the best time for it to happen. But
all's well that
funny nonetheless.
Yeah, all's well that ends well. Pre-season on the whole, now we've had. It feels like it's been quite a short programme this year, because obviously the Solihull Moors friendly was rescheduled. Obviously, it would have been a first team that Blues sent had it not been rescheduled, but obviously they played a week in a second time around to not disrupt their pre-season schedule. So it's been Sevilla on July the 12th when the programme started, Burton Albion, Port Vale and Forest. I'm only looking at the Blues first team fixtures here, because obviously they do have other games against Crewe and Northampton too. Winners and losers of pre-season. I'm thinking 3 players for each. Who are the big winners and who are the kind of losers of the pre-season programme, do you think, Ryan?
Well, I mean, one of the names you've got written down is Allsop, which I think is a clear one. He's got that number 1 shirt. He's I think probably one of the ones we mentioned earlier as well, Asai Samuel. Although he hasn't really, I suppose, truly showcased what he's capable of yet, the fact that he's been brought in, he's got that right back shirt, I think is a big plus, particularly given how important Laird was. Yeah, I suppose Keshi Anderson, I think it's easy to... I mean, another name you've got written down, so I apologise there, but obviously similar minds.
Stealing my thunder here.
I know. I just think, I think when you think about the 11 yesterday in particular, I know we haven't brought in all the attacking players yet, but I think he's always one of those players that I think a lot of people are going to look down in, particularly away from Blues as well. I think a lot of people are looking at Keshi Anderson and just think like he's the guy that potentially gets replaced. And I think it's hard to overstate how important he is to the team. As you mentioned earlier, it's not just the quality in the final third, it's the work he gets to. I mean, even yesterday, there's a couple where he's pinching the ball in the middle of the pitch because he's just reading the pressing triggers and just switched on. And I think that makes such an importance, particularly when you've got someone like not that he doesn't work hard, but you can't imagine, say, Dimmy Gray having that same urgency and switching on quite as quickly with regards to those pressing triggers. And having someone like Anderson to counterbalance that, I think is so key to the team. And it's good that Davies is continuing to be mindful of that.
There was a little nutmeg on Elliot Anderson as well in his own defensive third that was very good. He shows he's got the quality as well. And Keshi Anderson, I was having this conversation again with someone last week about kind of, you probably can't underestimate the system player and the importance of the system player in this day and age where everything is so well drilled and well coached. And I think Keshi Anderson is the ultimate system player at Blues. Yes, he might not have the individual quality of a Jay Stansfield or a Damari Gray and might not be able to, win a game on his own. But in a team where it is very much about the team, I think Keshi Anderson is an absolutely integral player. I think he still can have an excellent season and be, start 30 championship games. And, yes, you can look at his past career and say he's never really been, anything more than a kind of relegation battler in the championship. He's had seasons in League One where he's done very well, but has never quite made that step up and been really consistently good in the championship. But, I've seen enough over the last 2 years, particularly when Blues were in the championship, to say that he can be effective in the right system. And yeah, Keshi Anderson certainly doesn't lack belief in himself. So who's to say that he can't compete for it and keep a place this season?
I think the one thing that struck me in that first season, the championship season, was his intelligence. It doesn't have that extra yard of pace that maybe a top winger will have. But the timing of his movement, the timing of his runs, the timing of his pressing triggers, is very sharp and very quick to see the picture. And I think what we saw last season was that we had an Anderson that not only had that and the work ethic, but had the extra fitness, the extra sharpness to be able to deliver that more consistently. And that does lead to moments like the goal he scored against, the impact he had against Lincoln in the 3-1, the goal he scored against Huddersfield, and just consistency through the season. He was, a very important player to us, and hopefully we continue to see that this year, regardless of who else comes in.
Yeah, and the losers of pre-season, I hate battering players after pre-season. Obviously, you look at James Beadle, he's going to start the season, we think, as the number 2 goalkeeper. So, obviously it's not gone how he would have wanted. He's played in those friendlies against Crewe and Northampton, where it was a second string 11, and obviously conceded a good number of goals. So he's, as we mentioned earlier, a very highly rated goalkeeper. There is going to come a stage this season where he's going to be really putting pressure on Allsop, and there's going to be that conversation to be had. I know undoubtedly that will happen. We'll presumably see him in the Cups as well early on in the season, and see what he's got to offer. But yeah, he's obviously not going to be particularly pleased that he's going to be starting the season on the bench, but it's down to him to force his way in. The 2 others are probably more obvious that I've got down. Dion Sanderson, firstly, to be the club's captain, 18 months ago. And when the club worked so hard to sign him 2 years ago, to now be in a position where, Chris Davies was talking about his centre-backs the week before last and didn't even, recognise that Sanderson was part of the first team squad. So he's very much out the picture now, and we'll obviously move on this summer. Wasn't even involved with the pre-season media day. So, they haven't even got a picture or whatever of him to give to Sky if there is an injury crisis at centre-back and Dion Sanderson is needed to play against Ipswich, which obviously hopefully won't happen. But yeah, so Sanderson very clearly out the picture. And the other one I've got down is Lyndon Dykes. Dykes is a very difficult one because I look at Lyndon Dykes and I really want him to be the big physical striker that Birmingham City need to give him that option to replace Lukas Djukovic. And he's got the frame. He's 6'3", well built, quite good in the air, as we saw against Bradford with that header last season. But he just doesn't put himself about in that way. He probably wants to play more as a number 10, as a second striker, and that has been largely where he's been used in pre-season. That's where he played when he came on against Forest, just off Kyogo. But I don't think that he's a viable option in that position for Blues in the Championship. I think in League One, yes, he had some very effective games last year. But I think to be effective for Blues in the Championship, he needs to be what he was for QPR, a big physical striker who attacks crosses and scores headed goals. And if he's not going to be that, then Blues probably do need to replace him. And to be fair, of the subs that came on against Forest, I was probably more disappointed with his impact. He wasn't as effective as the others for me, and he did, to be fair, almost give Forest a goal right at the end with a poor back pass towards the defence. So Dykes, for me, probably struggled for not just for minutes in pre-season because he's clearly been out of the first 11, but just to show what he could bring to the party in the Championship.
I suppose there is one other name to throw in there, and that's Tyler Roberts, who couldn't even manage to get on the pitch against the likes of Solihull Moors and Northampton due to injury. And I think that's probably just a summary of where he is. And if I can just pop one more name into the winners, and it's not necessarily that he's going to play for us, but Alphonse Samsted, obviously one of those that was completely shut aside, didn't travel to Portugal. I haven't seen anything about injury. I think it was just he's not going to be involved. I watched the game against Solihull Moors, and while you've got, with the greatest respect, like, Dion Sanderson turned up, and you can just see all the issues there as to the reasons as to why he's not going to play for us. I thought Samsted looked a cut above, as you would expect. Scored his goal and actually worked himself back into the picture to being selected for the friendly against Port Vale. Got his minutes yesterday, and although he's not going to be involved with us, I think it's just a credit to his character and his, the work ethic he's sort of put in, and the fact that he's not thrown a strop. He hasn't sort of, not cared. I think it just speaks a lot to him, his professionalism, and the fact that he's, probably still going to move on, but that he's involved again. There's a very real chance that he could actually be named in the squad for the Ipswich game just to be part of the group, which I think, says plenty about him.
I'd probably throw George Hall into that mix as well. I'm not sure George Hall will be part of the Championship squad when all is said and done come September 1st. But to be in this position this year, whereas, last year he was very much kind of on the outside under Chris Davies. He clearly didn't really take a shine to him when he came in for at the start of pre-season. And I think Hall ended up playing the odd minute here and there at right back. And George Hall's not a right back. He was just playing there because Blues didn't have a second right back at that point. So for him to come back from a he had injuries last season at Walsall, but he also had a productive loan spell and managed to play in a League Two player final and did very well and was one of Walsall's better players at the end of the season. To have that season where he's played probably the second most minutes across the season in his career after his first season at Blues when he was just 18, and then to come back and have a pre-season where he's been given a proper chance in the position that he actually plays, off the right, coming into a number 10 position. I think it's good that Chris Davies had that look at him, had a proper look at him, because I'm one of the kind of believers in George Hall. I think there's no real point loaning him out. I think, George Hall's got 1 year left in his contract. He's got the athleticism to make an impact in the Championship. We've seen him play in the Championship before and do well. He's obviously got an enormous amount of talent and ability. Why not just keep him around? If he wants to, at this point in his career, go and play every week, and he could do that in League One or League Two, then fair enough. But I think George Hall's worth persisting with, and I would like Blues to explore that avenue before letting him leave.
I think the one benefit in his case might be that he's under 21.
Exactly, doesn't count towards the squad.
Doesn't count towards the squad. Look, I mean, whether the club or Davies potentially looks at someone like a Zoid Beteka to take that spot instead of a George Hall remains to be seen. But obviously Hall was involved with the first team yesterday, and Beteka was with the under 21s. Can't think who they played against, but
Albion.
Yeah. So maybe Hall has that spot for the meantime, just on account of a bit more first team experience. But yeah, be interesting. Just nice to sort of get pre-season's not particularly easy. I think there's a lot of older first team players. I mean, Bielik's another one we could mention that, we got 13 minutes at the end of yesterday for Clara. So Clara, always keep, I don't even pronounce his name right. But, there's a lot of experienced players. And I think just worth noting those two, just on account of it's easy just to get cast aside and pushed aside like a Sanderson or the Tyler Roberts. And I think those two have clearly shown that, they've got the bit between the teeth, and whether they stay with us or end up moving off, they've clearly put the work in, showed the professionalism and kept themselves involved with the first team picture, which is all you can do at this stage, really.
Yeah. Before we finish, a little bit on transfers. Obviously, it has been a bit quieter than it was early July when Blues signed 6 players in the space of a week. 8 in total so far this summer, if you include Phil Neumann, who obviously joined on a pre-contract from Hanover in January. Chris Davies admits he wants a left back. We know they're after a striker as well. A number of strikers have already been linked with the club. I wouldn't be surprised if they looked at right wingers /10, a guy to drifting off that right side in the current system. Chris Davies does prefer a left footer for that position, which makes me think at some stage we might see Kanya Fujimoto operate there in the same way we've seen Willem Willemsen play there and Kieran Dowell in the past. They would have liked to have brought Kieran Dowell back, but he does seem to be quite forefront in Russell Martin's plans at Rangers. So whether that happens really remains to be seen. I do expect things to happen this month because I think, like Chris Davies did last year, he'll probably give players the first 3 or 4 games and then decide whether he's gonna continue with them or move them on and bring better players or different players in. Like last season, for example, Koji Miyoshi and Sariki Dembele started the first game against Reading and then were sold before the end of the month. So, things can happen in August and it wouldn't be a surprise given the way Chris Davies works if something like that did happen. The latest link to Blues is Chuba Akpom, who is on the books of Ajax, but probably best known for that really, really goal-laden spell at Middlesbrough a couple of years ago where he scored 28 goals in 40 championship games to win a Golden Boot. Playing more as a 10 that season, I believe. Played up front at times, but played a bit as a 10 in a 4-2-3-1. Obviously, that is the system that Blues play. He's been to Ajax, scored 11 goals in his first Eredivisie season. Spent the first half there last season as well. I think scored 8 goals across all competitions, including 4 in the Europa League before being loaned out to French side Lille in January. I think it was 3 and 14 for Lille. They had the option to sign him permanently, but passed that option up. So now he's on the market again. Ajax are more keen to sell him permanently. According to De Telegraaf, a Dutch newspaper, Blues have discussed the possibility of taking him on loan with an optional obligation should they reach the Premier League. Chuba Akpom, what are we thinking there, Ryan?
You can't really turn your nose up, can you? It's quite. I think the point was made by Bennett Blues Breakdown. The kind of players we've signed this summer are guys that have got a real high ceiling in terms of where they've been and the kind of clubs they've played for. Probably just slightly on the way down in terms of maybe not having the best season or 2 at the clubs they've been at, and needing to move back to England essentially, or move. I suppose find a new home, which hopefully we can provide. So again, you can already see the sort of quality a couple of those are bringing, and you imagine that'll continue with the guys we're going to bring in. Akpom's an interesting one because he, I suppose, similar-ish to us, and that Middlesbrough team that season when he scored so many goals, they played a 4-2-3-1 where the left back went down the one side, the right winger held the width on the other, and he was the second striker behind what's his name, Cameron Archer.
Cameron Archer, yeah.
And it was that sort of front three, so it'd be a similar-ish sort of role to us. And I think what he did was play as the second striker, but that sort of inside-y right kind of position with the left winger drifting him. I think when you see the roles that Stansfield picked up yesterday, dropping off the front, and how the way Gray was the one spinning in behind, you can kind of already see the fit there of either he's the one spinning in behind or he's the one sort of dropping off to play as the sort of secondary 10 with, I presume it's going to be Doyle. But you can kind of already see that role almost being earmarked for him already, which would be quite an interesting one. Obviously gives us a bit of a size. I think he's the type of player, when you see the players who've been linked to up front, don't know how many of them have been true, but I think Machina's been mentioned, McBurney's been mentioned, Duxha's been
They've all got a similar profile, haven't they?
Yeah, they all like to. They're not really strikers. They're almost second strikers, which I think Akpom fits. And his underlying numbers have always been good. It was just that one season he really, the chances were just being created for him regularly. And you'd like to think, I mean, if we lined up next season with a front 5 of Anderson, Doyle, Akpom, Gray, and Stansfield, it's a level above where we were last season for sure. I realise I'm spitballing a little bit there in terms of the front 5, but the names you mentioned on paper all of a sudden are, you've got Kyogo on the bench, and it just feels like they've really taken the importance of the quality of that front line. And I think it was something Davis mentioned in the interview with you, wasn't it? The finishers and creators and wanting one of them.
Yeah, the only thing that concerns me a little bit is the age profile of some of these players. Like Akpom, and I'm someone who's turning 30 this month, so to kind of look at a 30-year-old and write them off is not what I want to be doing. But you look at someone like Akpom, he turns 30 in October. Kyogo's 30, 31 in January. Neumann's 28, so obviously a little bit younger. Same as Asai Samuel, 27. Gray's 29 now. You are kind of getting the ready-made product, aren't you? Kind of getting the guys who have been there and done it. And I did bring it up with Chris Davies actually when I spoke to him a week or two ago, and he said it's not really by design. It's just that he does really value experience and players that have been there and done it, but they're kind of obviously looking at the value of the player and what their value could become, and just kind of making decisions really. What's best for the club. And the only issue or concern I would have is if Blues didn't go up this year, then there's probably a lot of pressure to go up next year, given that you're giving these players 3-year contracts, and you probably don't want to be getting to the final year of those contracts with them all still in the building, when they're probably going to be a little bit, going down in terms of their kind of their peak years. They'll be past the peak years, some of them. And then you've obviously still got to have them and try and go again and do what you haven't done the previous year or two. So that it concerns me a little bit, but you can't really argue with the quality and caliber of player that the club are signing going to be linked with.
Yeah, I think 2 points on that. One, I think this is where Davies gets miscategorised a lot because we dominated the ball so much last year and we played the way we did. I think there is a conception from the outside that is a typical modern day coach who can only coach possession football, and it'd be interesting to see what he does when he can't sort of dominate games and so on. I think we saw regularly last year that he's not afraid to do, he's not afraid to bring on players to be defensive. He's not afraid to go long. He's not afraid to, play out wide, play through the middle. Like, he's very adept at finding different ways to play football. And I think this is where he gets miscategorised from the outside. I mean, even in that first interview we did, he said, he described himself as a pragmatist.
Yeah.
And I think the off-ball stuff is more important to him than the on-ball stuff. And I think this is where he gets miscategorised a lot with regards to the style and also his willingness to use experience. Because after every defeat last year, he was willing. I think after Shrewsbury, brought back Bielik. He brought Davies and May in, didn't he, for Harrison Laird. After Willemsen, after Bolton, he dropped Willemsen and brought in Bielik to settle the team down a little bit and try and get that result. I just think he gets miscategorised quite a bit. It's not that he isn't a modern, forward-thinking coach, but there's a lot more to him than just a Russell Martin style, have 70 possessions, 70% of the ball, and that's the only way we play football.
He's all about control, isn't he? And his philosophy is very much, if we've got the football, they can't score a goal, can they? So it's as defensive as it is attacking. It's designed to keep clean sheets largely, isn't it? That's what we saw last season. The number of clean sheets Blues kept in League One. I think they'll be similar this season. They didn't blow that many teams away. And this season, again, their victories will probably be by 1 and 2 goals rather than by 3, 4, 5, as you'll see with some of the teams in the Championship. So, you probably are right on that, Ryan. Before we finish, I'm planning to do hopefully a predictions podcast later this week, but I do want to quickly get your thoughts. Probably more of a hot take than anything else, at the end of pre-season. But what are your hopes and expectations for Blues this season?
Probably, when we finished last season, I was looking at the sides in and around the top 6 and comparing them to ours, and there wasn't much in it at all. I think Coventry was the point I reached, finishing in 5th place, where I looked and thought their starting 11 is better than ours, which might be a little bit of bias in there, but that's genuinely the way I felt. So top 6 was always the aim for me. I think it's just whether we can get into that top 2. When I did my predictions, I had us in 3rd, but I think it's a little bit of bias and a little bit of maybe expecting those 3 or 4 big signings to come in. It feels like we still haven't really touched the surface in terms of what we can actually do this summer. I think Akpom is probably, another part of what that may look like. only thing stopping me going for the top two, I think, is just one, the little bit of unknown at the moment, and two, as you've just pointed out, I think we've signed a lot of forwards that have a very high ceiling, but we don't know how reliable they're all going to be. And I think that's where you're looking at probably Stansfield and Anderson having big roles to play this season, just to be the stability in there, essentially. I think the rest you're probably looking at has got a lot to prove in terms of durability and, being able to... I don't know how many of them are going to turn up and start 40 games next season. Mm. And that's probably the one thing that maybe puts me off going too big on us, I think, particularly in comparison to, like I said, we've mentioned Ipswich, haven't we? And they've got so many known quantities in the Championship. It's just... that might prove to be the difference. So yeah, I've got us in third at the moment, but top six for sure. I think we might be on the coattails of that automatic promotion race, unless two of them really do just shoot off to the moon.
Okay, yeah, I can probably get on board with some of that. Yeah, I think Ipswich for me are the big standout. I think below them, I think there are three or four that are much of a muchness, and it's going to be quite tight. Like you said, I do think that Blues can be definitely top six challengers. Whether they can catapult themselves into that automatic conversation remains to be seen. They might need a two or three more good signings to do that. But yeah, Ryan, thank you very much for your time. I hope everyone enjoyed. Please do subscribe, follow, hit like, and leave a comment in the comment section, and we'll try and get around to them in future episodes. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and it's a big keep right on from both of us.